morning, everyone. We'll proceed with our next witness.
Good morning, Your Honor. Thank you. Before I call the state's next witness, I'd like to offer two exhibits into the record that were published yesterday, exhibits 75 and 267.
Those are received.
Thank you, Your Honor. The state calls John Edwards.
Raise your right hand. You swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes, sir.
Have a seat. And we have been having witnesses remove their masks. If you're comfortable with that, we prefer that so we can hear you a little better.
Absolutely.
And if you could pull up a little bit to the microphone. And start by stating your full name, spelling each of your names.
My name is John Curtis Edwards, JONCURTISEDWARDS.
Mr.
Thank you.
Susha.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Would you please tell the jury your occupation?
Minneapolis Police Sergeant,
How long have you held that position?
2007, so approximately 14 years.
Not as a sergeant, but as a police officer for 14 years?
Yes, sir.
All right. So you started as a police officer in 2007. Did you start with the Minneapolis Police Department?
I started as a cadet in the cadet program.
All right. But that was your
2007.
first job in law enforcement?
Yes, sir.
Right. Okay. You started as a cadet. Describe that experience, if you would.
The cadet program is a curriculum designed for those who have graduated college from an accredited college to undergo more criminal justice and law classes, as well as partake in skills, as well as various scenario-based simulations pertaining to law enforcement. It's a curriculum designed with the end goal.
Yeah, David.
of
I hear
becoming
you.
post-certified by the
They're gonna riot no matter what. That's what I think.
And the post is the Police Officer Standards and Training Board. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. And that's how you get your license to be a police officer in the state.
Anything good happen? Just started, man.
After obtaining that, you.
This is the first witness today.
A licensed peace officer in the state of Minnesota.
I gave him a couple minutes
And
head
you
start so we
occasionally
can skip through the breaks.
Oh, yes. Not a problem. All right.
This is the very beginning.
Do you occasionally take continuing education credits to keep your license current?
Correct.
You do that as part of in-service training, is that right?
Correct.
Okay. So after you graduated from the academy and became post-certified, what was your job duties?
Good morning, Gigi.
Upon graduating the academy,
Hello, hello.
you are a new officer in FTO.
What do you mean by FTO?
Every new officer is assigned a FTO, which is a field training officer, and that is usually a veteran officer who you, for about 4 to 5 months, you're on rotation with a new or with a veteran officer as you learn the ropes.
After you completed your field training, then did you become a patrol officer?
Yes, sir.
And can you please share with the jury the different places within Minneapolis that you were assigned as a patrol officer?
So I finished my FTO rotation in the 3rd Precinct, South Minneapolis. From there, I went and was assigned to the.
Am I on Twitch right now? No, I am not.
Also
Oh,
South
I
Minneapolis,
forgot to put up my
located
little
off the 31st and Nickel,
sign. There you
where
go.
I was the patrol.
Not on Twitch because this trial's against TOS,
And I primarily worked.
and I want to stream the trial.
I middle watch shift, and our dog watch shift. Our dog watch shift just pretty much means overnights. We start
Hello,
at
Melly.
nighttime and the shift ends when the sun comes
Hello.
up.
Good morning. Good morning.
So my journey started on the night shifts in the 5th precinct.
Now, through the course of your MPD career, you've been assigned to different units or teams, is that right?
Yes, sir.
One of those was a community response team, is that right?
Yes. I did approximately maybe a year and a half in our CERT team, community response team. That is a unit that's not bound by 911 patrol. That is a unit that's primarily focused on crime patterns that are happening within that precinct. So we did a lot of burglary suppression, robbery suppression, prostitution, things of that nature that were highly focused on specific crimes in that precinct.
You've also been assigned to the community engagement unit, is that right?
Yes, sir.
And could you describe what that unit is?
Let me take some water for this. So I was in the community engagement unit for approximately 2 years. Now that unit was a unit that derived from...
You bought Oculus, they
President
banned your
Obama's
Facebook?
21st Century Policing Initiative, which pretty much means...
If you want VR, you don't want a
more
VR
cameras
headset
being
that's
pointed to
tied to
police.
your fuckbook account
And
anyway.
that unit that I was a part of was primarily focused on the specific needs of the community.
Get the
So
Steam
I
one
worked
instead.
directly with members of the community.
'Cause
with,
seriously, fuck Facebook.
Like neighborhood watch organizations, a lot of meetings, but it was specific to specific needs of the community. We weren't 911 patrol.
And after you finished that assignment, you mentioned that your current rank is that of sergeant, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
On leave right now.
And you had to take a test to be a sergeant and then get selected, correct?
Yes, sir.
And so now you're a patrol sergeant. Where are you currently assigned?
I'm on leave right now.
Prior to that,
Everyone hit that thumbs up button.
what
I
precinct
was
were you
assigned to the 3rd precinct dog watch shift, the overnight shift.
Now, when you're working as a shift sergeant, do you typically wear a uniform,
Yes, sir.
outfitted with a body-worn camera?
Yes, sir.
Do you have a partner?
No. I'm one of 3 sergeants that are on that shift, though, but no partner.
Are you assigned a car
I want to
Yes,
get
sir.
when you ride?
a
in
VR at some
solo?
point,
Yes, sir.
but it's just kind of a waste of money right now until there's better shit for it.
Now, you've, as a Minneapolis police officer, you've signed a certification that you're familiar with.
But I would never get the
various,
Facebook one in my-
Minneapolis Police
personally, I
Department
wouldn't.
Policies, is that right?
Yes, sir.
And as part of that, in addition to all of the policies that have been introduced, we're just going to focus on that of critical incident response. All right. Now, when we looking back to May 2020, you were supervising the dog watch shift. Were you working on May 25, 2020?
Yes, sir, I was.
And when do you recall beginning your shift?
Like I said, I'm the dog watch shift. Our shift started at 20-30 hours, which is 8:30 p.m.
And what's the first thing you do when you start the shift?
First thing I do is conduct roll call with my officers.
Describe what the roll call involves.
Roll call is basically attendance, making sure all the officers are there, everybody's there, accounted for, they're ready to work. It's a time where we pass along pertinent information about what has gone on during the day, or maybe what crime patterns and things to be aware of. You know,
Oh,
if the
there is?
officers
That
have
sounds cool,
anything
Ant.
that, needs to be brought to the table, they can as well.
There's a game I really like that would come out for it. I might get one,
Roll call
but
concludes with me giving the
maybe an
officers their
HCC
squad
one.
assignments and then sending them on their way so that they can start answering 911 calls.
And do you typically receive information from the previous shifts that you can pass it along to the officers you're sending out in your shift?
Sometimes. Sometimes, yeah.
You're generally familiar with the officers that you personally supervise?
Yes.
And other officers within the 3rd precinct? Are you familiar with other officers in the 3rd Precinct who are not necessarily on your specific shift?
Oh, yes, yes.
Are you familiar with an individual named Derek Chauvin?
Not personally, but I do know who he is.
Do you believe you'd recognize him if you saw him?
Absolutely.
Do you see him in the courtroom today?
Yes.
Would you please point to him and thank you. Your Honor, may the record reflect that the witness has identified the defendant? How do you know him?
Like I said, I don't know him personally. We worked out of the same building, but we worked on different shifts. I wasn't his direct supervisor.
Sort of a name and face recognition.
Absolutely.
Ever socialized outside of work?
No.
Are you familiar with an officer named Tu Tao?
Yes, I know who he is.
Is it the same nature, basically the same type of relationship as the defendant?
Yes, we worked out of the same building, but we were on different shifts.
And Thomas Lane?
Yes.
How would you describe your relationship with Thomas Lane?
He was also on the mid-watch shift, but Thomas Lane did do a rotation when they were new on my shift, and I believe he was on my shift for about a month when he was, I think it was probably his 2nd month on the job.
Have you ever interacted with him outside of the work setting?
No, sir.
And Alexander King?
Him as well. Same relation. He and Officer Lane were both on my shift for approximately a month, and I believe that was also his 2nd month of being on the job.
So I'd like
That was
to,
while they were on their FTO rotation. They rotate between different shifts.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'd like to then bring you back to that roll call on the date of question. Did you receive a telephone call around roll call time?
I believe the phone call was shortly, just as roll call concluded, yes.
And who was that phone call from?
I received a phone call from Sergeant Kluger, who was the mid-watch sergeant.
Do you recall what Sergeant Kluger, let me back up. Did Sergeant Kluger give you information that
It's
you
a first-person
relied upon
shooter,
to
sweet.
take further steps in your duties that night?
Yes.
Okay. What did Sergeant Kluger tell you?
Sergeant Kluger informed me that he was at the hospital at that time, and he was with a
Sounds
male
tight, man.
that he described may or may not live. Later on in the night, I found out that that male was Mr. Floyd. He said he was down there at the hospital. He asked me if I would be willing to respond to the incident location of 38th in Chicago because he was tied up at the hospital at the time. He asked me if I would respond down there just to make sure, just in case we had to secure that area and make contact with any of his officers that were there on scene still, because this had the potential to be a possible critical incident.
Can you describe then what you mean by critical incident?
Usually an incident, an officer-involved incident where either the officer or somebody else has died, or an officer or somebody else has suffered great bodily harm that later led to death.
And based on your knowledge of Minneapolis Police Department policy, what is supposed to happen if there is a critical incident with the crime scene and with the participants?
The crime scene is supposed to be secured, which means locked down, and that is for the purpose to preserve any evidence that is there. The involved parties or the involved officers usually are chilling and awaiting escort sergeants so that they can be escorted to an interview room downtown. Appropriate notifications are made. IA, homicide, if you will, the upper administration The area is canvassed, which just means there's a designated amount of officers that are searching the area looking for any witnesses that can give a synopsis of what they saw. And then we wait for the investigators to get there, car 21, and pretty much wait for further information from some of the superiors.
Do you take any steps with respect to body-worn cameras and ensuring that those are activated?
Absolutely.
What do you do?
To make sure that ensure that everybody's body-worn cameras are active and running at all times.
And in this specific case, did you take steps consistent with the procedures you just outlined?
Yes, when I arrived on scene, yes.
Looks like Will Smith playing a lawyer.
Oh,
that was loud.
One.
I was not ready for that.
After you got off the phone with Sergeant Kluger, did you go directly to 38th in Chicago?
I told Sergeant Kluger that I didn't mind
Shout
going
out,
down there.
too.
I just had to gather some of my things and then I'd head down there. So,
Gigi
I got
with the
down
$5.
to
$5.
2:30
Let's
in
go.
Chicago
Hard,
about 9:35
hard,
p.m.
hard, hard,
And I
hard.
arrived there.
Thank you so much, Gigi. Let's go. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
And it was activated.
Yes.
Please describe the scene as you recall it when you arrived.
You are the best.
Um,
Biddies from titties. Ooh, ooh.
38th in Chicago, so.
Here comes the money.
Oh my god.
Money talk.
I gotta turn this up then.
When I arrived,
Maybe I should turn
the only people
that
that were there
alert
were also
off
King and Lane.
or down.
There wasn't very many other people around when I arrived there.
I might have to turn down some of those loud alerts.
Now, you
Why is it so
indicated
fucking
that the
loud?
body-worn camera
I turned down
was
Streamlabs,
activated.
okay.
And prior to testifying today, you had an opportunity to
Streamlabs,
view
Squatter.
these still photographs taken from the footage of your body-worn camera. Is that right?
Rip everyone's ears.
And at this time, Your Honor, I'm going to offer Exhibits 81 through 95, which are images taken from Sergeant Edwards'
Alright,
body-worn
the really loud ones I'm turning off for now.
81 through 95 inclusive are received.
You indicated that officers King and Lane were at the scene when you arrived.
But the ones that aren't that loud are still there.
Publish Exhibit 81. Do you recognize the individuals in this photograph, Exhibit 81?
I do.
And who is this individual?
It's Officer Lane.
And this?
It's Officer King.
It seemed appropriate. It makes sense. It wasn't your
So
fault.
The jury, what?
Normally when we're listening to
officers
protests, it's like
when you arrived.
they're fucking loud, you know? Blah, 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 blah.
By Officer
So we
King.
really have to
First
crank
thing I
up the
did was
volume
I told
in
him,
those
"Hey,
cases. But this is really quiet.
body-worn camera's not on. Turn it on now." He did. Officer Lane came out of the car several seconds afterwards. Told the same thing to him, and he activated his body-worn camera.
So Lane was initially sitting in the car.
Yes, sir.
Do you know what car?
It's all good now,
The
chat.
squad car, the one that's pictured right there.
Thanks again, Gigi.
Sure.
Was that a squad car assigned to that sector within the 3rd Precinct?
Yeah, that's a middle watch squad.
After you instructed both officers to activate and make sure their body-worn camera was activated, did you tell them anything else they needed to do?
Yes, I asked them where they had interaction with Mr. Floyd. They told me that they interacted with him on the sidewalk there by their squad car. They also told me they interacted with him on Chicago Avenue, right in front of the Cup Foods store.
And based on those statements, then, did you direct them to place crime scene tape around the area to preserve the scene?
Yes, so with that information, I was able to gather where the incident occurred, and then I instructed them to place crime scene tape around the area so that we could preserve any potential evidence that was there.
First, I'm going to ask that publish Exhibit 82. All right, what do you see in this photograph?
That appears to be Officer King putting up crime scene tape.
Publish Exhibit 1. Do you have one of these up there, little stylus?
Yep.
If you could use that to just roughly outline the
He
area
doesn't seem like an officer
where crime scene tape was put up.
to me.
Okay, so generally, their squad was right here at the time. This is different.
No.
Their squad was here. Mr.
No.
Floyd's vehicle was right here.
Hell yeah.
I had them encompass this whole area. So crime scene tape was around that whole intersection. It encompassed the entire intersection.
Let me try something,
At
chat.
the time you were having them do this, were there any other officers in the area at the time, or was it just King and Lane?
At that time, I believe it was myself, King and Lane, but I had other officers from my shift responding to the area because I knew we were going to probably have to lock down that area.
So you asked.
So it still is.
Yes.
It's not like
something that
extremely quiet.
No.
was-
Got it.
I asked for additional officers. Oh, I'm sorry.
All right. And that was for the specific purpose of keeping the area secure.
Yes, sir.
If you would clear that, Lane.
Don't give me your
At some
nut.
point you
I don't.
learned,
I don't want that.
that was a critical incident,
Bro, my nut button came back to life, but
but you were taking steps
it sounds like it's
to secure the
on its
scene
last legs.
of a critical incident before that.
Yes, sir.
So, at this point, did you really know anything about what had happened that caused you to be called out there specifically?
No, I didn't know specifics. No. At that point,
Fuck.
very little specifics.
For
I
example,
was waiting for more phone calls from Sergeant Kluger for more direction of what was going on.
for example, you didn't know the defendant was involved at that point. Is that right?
Correct.
You had a brief interaction and conversation with King and Lane. Is that right?
Yes.
Based then on what they told you, you took some additional steps. Were you able to then communicate with the other officers that you directed to come to the scene to provide them direction?
Yes.
What did you ask the other officers to do?
A number of the officers I asked to canvass the area. As I explained before, that just means pretty much go door to door, see if there's any potential witnesses that may have been there when the incident occurred, and obtain a synopsis of what they saw, and to get their name and information. It's just searching for any potential witnesses and getting their story.
If we could publish Exhibit 83, another image from your body-worn camera, you see some of the other officers from your shift who you called to help you with the scene.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to ask you to just identify some of the folks in the picture. We'll start, of course, here. Who's that?
It's Officer Lane,
And this individual?
Officer Nerling,
And this person?
Yeah, this guy is a sergeant.
Kate,
This person?
Officer Oaks,
And this person?
and Officer Areola.
And Officer Areola was a fairly new officer at the time?
Yes, sir.
Now, would you please tell the jury just sort of the scope of the security you provided to this scene at that time during these the early morning hours now of May 26th? Is that right?
Yes, sir.
What did you do?
Shortly thereafter here, I received a call from Floyd telling me that escort officers or escort sergeants would be coming down, and that he was still downtown or at the hospital. I had been notified, and appropriate people in administration had been notified, and he just requested that the scene just remained secure. So, in answer to your question, we my guys and I just remained there for scene security to ensure that no vehicle or pedestrian traffic entered the crime scene and contaminated our scene.
You made sure no one came in to that roped off area.
Yes.
Did you take any steps with respect to the business Cup Foods?
Yes.
What did you do?
Sergeant Kluger asked me if I was able to make contact with the manager, and if so, speak with him, which I did.
How many officers at any given time were used to secure the scene?
I believe that night I only had about maybe 8 to 10 officers on. And I didn't have every single one of my officers on this scene. So there were still a lot of 911 calls that...
Drunk. I'm not even drunk yet, man.
In addition to securing the perimeter of the scene, did you secure any vehicles within the scene?
Yes, sir.
And what vehicles did you secure?
Officers King and Lane squad, as well as Mr. Floyd's vehicle that was parked ahead of theirs.
And could you describe that vehicle, please?
I honestly don't remember what kind of vehicle Mr. Floyd was driving.
Okay.
It was a dark colored vehicle, though, if I remember correctly.
Did you keep officers King and Lane out of the squad 320?
Yes, I did. And I told them to leave their belongings inside the squad car.
At this time, I'd like to publish Exhibit 84. So Exhibit 84, then, for the record, is a
Haterade, man.
photo from your body-worn camera taken at 21:50 and 17 seconds. Is that right?
Alright, I'm turning off the Titanic one. Too loud.
See both King and Lane in the photo, correct?
Yes.
Actually, fuck it. I'm turning off sound effects for now.
Is this where you had the initial interaction with them, where you asked them to get out of the vehicle so you could secure it?
That is.
And they complied with it?
They did.
Did you see anyone, including them, take anything out of the vehicle?
No.
Was the vehicle running or had it been stopped?
It was running.
What did you do since it was running?
I told them to get out of the car. They got out of the car.
And did you, at any point, stop the vehicle from running?
That wasn't until the BCA showed up, and I believe it was Special Agent Mike Phil told me that they were going to take custody of the squad and Mr. Floyd's vehicle. We noticed the squad car, was still running, so he instructed me to power it down.
You'd also mentioned something about a canvas. Did you at some point instruct officers to do a canvas of the area for possible witnesses?
Yes, I explained that, yes.
And what, since you didn't know much about what had happened, what were you asking the officers to look for?
Anybody that may have been in the area at the time that the incident occurred. We knew that the incident occurred before we got to work, so I guess we were just trying to get lucky. Maybe there was somebody still there that was willing to talk to us, or yeah.
Who did you send out to do the canvas?
Several officers.
Did that include Areola and Nerling?
Yes, it did.
They located any witnesses who were willing to speak with you?
What was that?
Did they locate any witnesses who were willing to speak with you?
Who were willing to speak with me?
Yes.
No.
Did you at any point interact with an elderly older gentleman, let's say older gentleman at the scene?
Yes.
Did he identify himself to you, first or last name?
He identified himself to me as Charles. He refused to give me his name.
His
full
self.
name.
Published Exhibit 87. This is another body-worn camera image, not from your body-worn camera, but it shows who is this?
That's me.
And is this Charles?
Yes, sir.
And this point captures the conversation that you had with him at 22:05 and about 43 seconds. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
He did not provide any information to you.
No, he did not. I explained to him that he'd be very valuable to us if he had something to say or if he saw something, but he told me he refused to say anything and wondered if he was under arrest, and I told him no. He told me he wanted to leave.
And of course, you didn't know whether or not he had spoken with anybody already about this incident.
Correct. That was the first time I'd seen him.
Did you ask King and Lane to participate in the canvass?
No, I don't believe I did. No.
What did you ask them to do?
I asked them to chill out because later on I knew from Sergeant Kluger that he had a couple of escort sergeants coming down to transport them to interview room 100.
Publish Exhibit 85. Right, looking at Exhibit 85 from your body-worn camera at 21:51:25, you see officers Lane and King. Were they standing where you told them to stand, waiting where you told them to wait? And at this time, you instructed them to keep their body-worn cameras activated. Is that right?
Correct.
Do you recall speaking with any other potential witnesses while you were at the scene?
No, I don't.
Do you recall entering Cup Foods?
Yes. Yes.
Speak with anybody at Cup Foods?
Yes. Like I said before, Sergeant Kluger asked me to see if I could make contact with the manager there at Cup Foods, and I did, and I spoke with him.
Publish Exhibit 86. Right, this is an image from your body-worn camera at 21:54 and 32 seconds. Who is that individual?
I do not remember his name, but he is the manager there at Cup Foods.
And did you learn whether or not he was a witness to the interaction between the police and George Floyd?
He said he didn't witness anything. I had a brief conversation with him.
Now, when you arrived, you testified that you had taken control of the scene, right? As the sergeant, you were the ranking officer there.
Yes, sir.
At some point, did another ranking officer arrive at the scene?
Yes. Lieutenant Zimmerman from Homicide arrived at the scene shortly after, as well as Sergeant Dale.
Publish Exhibit 88. I know that's a little hard to see. Can you identify the people in this photo?
That's myself, and that's Lieutenant Zimmerman.
When did he arrive approximately?
When did he arrive approximately?
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you the time he arrived. I can tell you the timestamp that I'm seeing right there. 22:06.
All right.
So that would be 10:06 p.m.
So even if not exact arrival time, this is pretty close in time to Lieutenant Zimmerman's first arrival?
Yes.
All right. When Lieutenant Zimmerman arrived, what happened with the scene?
What happened with the scene?
He came and just ensured that we had the scene secure. He came and ensured that we had officers that were canvassing the area for any potential witnesses that were still there. Yeah.
Did you see Lieutenant Zimmerman interact with either the involved officers, Lane or King?
I don't recall seeing him interact with Lane or King.
Did you
Might have.
impart to Lieutenant Zimmerman any information that you had gathered about the scene or potential witnesses to that point?
Can you ask that question again?
Sure. Did you tell Lieutenant Zimmerman what you did up to that point to get him caught up on the scene and the witnesses and what steps had been taken?
Oh, yes.
All right. Did he direct you to take any further steps now he's a lieutenant, so I suppose?
More canvassing of the area, and also he wanted more officers there at the scene.
Did he confirm that the scene itself was secure?
Yes.
And that the squad was secure at 320?
Yes.
And that Mr. Floyd's vehicle was secure?
Yes.
So there was another officer there, a Sergeant Bob Dale. What is Bob Dale assigned to?
He was there. He came with Lieutenant Zimmerman.
Bob Dale's from homicide, is that right?
I believe so.
And then with this being a critical incident, this was going to be handed over to the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, correct?
Well, at that point, we still didn't know if this was indeed a critical incident, but I was going under the assumption that it was, it was better safe to go that way than not.
Because of that, there were some steps taken to ensure that when this was handed off, it would be handed off in a manner that it could be taken over with smoothly, correct?
Yes.
So it was, did either Dale or Zimmerman make a suggestion to you about having a crime scene log?
Yes.
What did they ask for?
They just asked if a crime scene log had been started, and I tasked Officer Areola with that task.
Officer Areola.
Crime scene log is just a log
Sketch.
of names of officers and personnel that entered the crime scene.
And did you see Officer Areola start compiling a crime scene log?
Yes.
Publish Exhibit 89. You can see this Officer Areola here,
Yes.
and he appears to be holding something. Is that right?
Yes.
Is that the crime scene log?
I believe so.
So as you testified, at some point you learned that Mr. Floyd had died, correct?
Yes.
And do you recall how you received that information?
It was later on in the night, Sergeant Dale actually informed me that Mr. Floyd had passed away.
Was that pretty shortly after Dale and Zimmerman had arrived?
Yeah. Yes.
About 10:13 p.m., is that right?
It was sometime after Sergeant Dale and Lieutenant Zimmerman arrived.
And after that point, were there arrangements made for transport officers to bring Lane and King to City Hall pursuant to critical incident protocol?
There were.
Did you watch that happen?
Yes. Officers Walitsky and Officer Ashoff responded to the scene, and they were Officer King and Officer Lane, transport sergeants.
Publish Exhibit 90. There's additional body-worn camera footage. Do you see Officer or Sergeant Ashoff in this photo?
Yes.
Am I into areolas? That is a weird question, bro.
And Waletsky?
see Walitsky in this photo.
Was this so according to the timestamp, 22/18/14? Is that right?
Correct.
And that was around the time that the transport officers arrived, and I'm assuming the transport would have happened fairly shortly after that.
Correct.
And they transported Lane and King to, was it room 100 within City Hall?
Room 100.
And was it about shortly after that, about 15 minutes or so later, that the BCA took over the scene?
Yes, I was notified.
I'm not into aerials. I'm only into the tip of the pinky, right here.
Is on their way, and they'll be taking over.
If you have
the
a
scene,
sexy
so
pinky tip,
we were requested. Me and my guys were requested
then I'm in.
to just stay put for scene security.
Do you recall when the BCA arrived?
I don't remember what time they arrived. No.
Show you Exhibit 91. Do you remember the name of the agent? Is it called?
Yes, I believe his name was a Special Agent Michael Phil.
Can you tell the jury what you see here in Exhibit 91? Who are those people?
That appears to be Special Agent Michael Phil standing alongside Lieutenant Zimmerman.
Right here?
Yes.
That's at 2300. Is that right?
Correct.
That's the approximate time then that the BCA took over the scene?
Approximately.
You saw Special Agent Phil have a conversation with Lieutenant Zimmerman. After that conversation took place, did you have a conversation with Lieutenant Zimmerman?
I believe I had a conversation with both of them afterwards.
Okay.
Brief interaction.
When did Lieutenant Zimmerman remain at the scene after the BCA took over, or did he leave?
Well, he came up to me and just told me pretty much that it's in the BCA's hands now, and they'll be here, and just to ensure that myself and my officers remain on scene for scene security until the BCA tells us they're done with their job, and that we can take down the crime scene tape and leave.
Publish Exhibit 92. And is this Special Agent Phil?
Yes, that is.
During the period of time you were speaking with him and getting instruction on what to do with the scene?
Yes.
Did he ask you to do anything with Squad 320?
Yes.
What did
He
he
told
ask?
me that they were taking custody of both the squad and Mr. Floyd's vehicle, and we noticed that the squad was still running. He asked me to open it up and power it down, which I did.
Did you remove anything from the vehicle?
No, sir.
Now, at this point, the BCA has the scene, and you're no longer taking any investigative steps or collecting evidence, is that right?
Correct.
But did you make observations of other officers doing those things, watching the BCA?
Such as?
Such as anything with the vehicle?
No. No.
Did
I
you
didn't see anybody doing anything with the vehicles. Any other officer, if that's what you're asking.
Did you see other officers taking photographs, looking at the vehicle?
No, sir.
Did you see any forensic scientists or people you recognize to be forensic scientists come onto the scene?
Just the team of people that Special Agent Michael Phil had with him.
And those
There
were
were
the
several BCA people there.
Those were the folks who were allowed in the scene, is that right?
Yes.
At some point, did you watch Mr. Floyd's vehicle be actually towed away by the BCA?
Yes. Ultimately, Special Agent here had both the squad car as well as Mr. Floyd's vehicle towed from the scene.
And you watched them do that?
Yes, I was still on scene then.
publish Exhibit 94. Is this an image of the BCA towing away Squad 320?
Yes.
And they'd already towed the SUV at this point, is that right?
I believe so.
Can you tell the jury?
Am I drinking beers? What do you think, dude?
With the scene after the vehicles were towed away.
After the BCA had the vehicles towed away, it wasn't very long after that special agent Michael Phil told me that they were all finished now and we could take down the crime scene tape. And
What do you think? Shit just changed because it's Friday?
Yes, sir.
Publish Exhibit 95. This is at 3:34 and 54 seconds. What does this image show?
That's at 3:34 a.m. and that's me. Those are my hands helping take down the crime scene tape.
And so at this point, then the crime scene was cleared, no longer needed to be secured, and you would be able to exit the area. Is that right?
Correct.
You're drinking Stella?
No further questions, Your Honor.
Nice. My parents drink that. It's definitely boomer beer for sure. Friday means drink more. Hey, you guys know how they say when people die, they shit their pants? Think George Floyd shit his pants? Anthony. Oh yeah, so is prosecution trying to establish they mishandled the scene or that any evidence found in Floyd's truck shouldn't be admissible? Melissa. No. Establishing who was there, what was done, so evidence can be admitted into a record. They want to establish a timeline, I think. But really, this dude is going to go bonkers with the real autopsy report.
Thank you. Thank you, Sergeant. You may step down.
Thank you.
And next witness.
State will call Lieutenant Zimmerman to the stand.
You swear or affirm on your penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
So help you God.
Lieutenant, if you could give us your full name, spelling each of your names to start off.
Thank you.
Your full name, spelling each of your names.
Okay.
And also, if you could remove your mask.
Okay, thank you. It's Richard Zimmerman, R-I-C-H-A-R-D, and then Zimmerman, Z-I-M-M-E-R-M-A-N.
Mr. Craig.
Thank you. Can you please tell the jurors what you do for a living?
I'm a police officer with Minneapolis Police Department.
How long have you been a police officer?
Since June 3rd of 1981.
And all that with Minneapolis?
No, the first 4 years, from 81 to 85, I worked for the Fillmore County Sheriff's Department.
Fillmore Buttcrack
in
Sheriff's Department.
Southeast Minnesota.
What did you do there?
I was a patrol deputy responding to 911 calls.
And so then it was 1985 that you started with Minneapolis?
Yes, I had the weekend off and started in Minneapolis in June 5th of 1985.
And are you a licensed peace officer in the state of Minnesota?
Yes, I am.
When did you first
He looks like
obtain
a
your
fucking
license?
I'm
Jedi.
sorry?
When did you first obtain your license?
June 3rd of 1981.
And as a police officer, having that license, are you required to do certain things to maintain that license?
Yes.
What kinds of things do you have to do?
We have to do continuing ed, like any other professional license. And we have to do 40 hours of different education, professional education. in a certain time period. I'm not sure if it's 1 or 2 years.
And if you don't, somebody's going to let you know, right?
Yes, they will.
And so, since 1981, have you done all that's been required to maintain your license?
Yes, I have.
When you started with the Minneapolis Police Department in 1985, what was your job? What were your duties?
I was a patrolman. I worked the North Side Precinct. It's called Precinct 4. And I worked the 3rd Precinct. It's called Precinct 3, of course. And then my permanent assignment was the 5th Precinct, which is like Franklin, Nicollet, Hennepin Avenue, Lake Street.
So when you're working as a patrol officer, what kind of things do you do?
Yeah, well, we respond to 911 calls. We, deter crime, or try to deter crime, I should say. Yeah, that's kind of what we do. Traffic control, that kind of thing.
Out on the streets every day?
Yes.
At least every day you work, right?
Yes.
And so then, did your job duties change eventually?
Yes, in 1990, crack became really prevalent in the late 80s, and so I joined the crack team in the 5th Precinct, where there were 4 officers and a sergeant, and we would do search warrants, looking for drugs, that kind of thing.
And so what year was that? I'm sorry.
Pardon me?
What year was that?
1990 to 1993.
And what did you do then in 1993?
I took the sergeant's exam and passed it, and was assigned to the adult sex crimes unit.
And so what does it mean to be promoted to sergeant?
Well, you take a series of tests, and once you're promoted, you express your interest is patrol or investigations. And so I talked to the lieutenant in charge of the sex crimes unit and expressed my interest.
So you mentioned having to take an exam,
Yes.
just like sitting down and, like we do in school, taking an exam.
Yeah, it was a written exam, and once you pass that phase, then you would take an oral exam, and then you were given your scores.
And so you became a sergeant. Did some supervisory responsibilities come with that?
Yes.
Can you just describe for the jurors, like, what kinds of responsibilities a sergeant takes on?
Yeah, well, as a investigative sergeant, you're assigned a case to follow up with the victims, and you do search warrants. And when you're doing search warrants, you have officers that assist you. So you'll assign them duties that, such as, assisting with the search warrant.
And also have responsibilities to make sure the officers underneath you are properly trained?
Yes, absolutely, yeah. And, when I would do search warrants, I would explain to the officers that we don't want anyone to get hurt, either the officers or the subjects.
And so, just continuing with your history then, you went into the sex crimes unit as a sergeant, and subsequent to that, did your responsibilities change?
I need some hand sanitizer.
Tell the jurors about that.
Yeah, in 1995,
I got it.
The homicide unit was expanding because of the amount of murders that were occurring in Minneapolis in 1995. So they brought in myself and one other guy from the robbery unit, and we were assigned partners in the homicide unit.
And which unit do you currently work in?
1995.
Which unit do you currently work in?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. The homicide unit.
So from 1995 to today, you've been in the homicide unit?
Yes.
And did you, sometime during that period, receive another promotion?
Yes.
Tell the jurors about that.
Yeah, in 2007, I took a lieutenant's exam, or 2006. I took the lieutenant's exam, and that's a series of, again, written tests and oral. If you pass that phase, then you go on to the oral interview phase, and you're notified of your results.
And so you were promoted to lieutenant?
Yes, I was.
So how did that change your responsibilities, your job duties?
Well, usually when you're promoted, you're assigned to a different unit than you worked. But they asked me to stay in the homicide unit because of my experience. And so I took over the job in 2008, November of 2008. And the duties are, I get called for every death, suspicious death, deaths where, it's clearly a homicide, deaths where officers have any question about how a person may have died. I go out to the scenes.
And do you also supervise other officers?
Yes, I do.
Just describe for the jury your responsibilities in supervising other officers.
Yes, we have, right now we have 12 detectives in homicide that make up 6 teams. They work with a partner in homicide, and they're on a rotation basis for being on call. They're on call Monday through Monday, and when a team is on call, I'll go out to a scene, assess what the death may be involved, and I'll call the on-call team to come in and start working the case.
So you still respond to scenes,
Yes.
but you also supervise the work of the investigators.
Yes. I every morning when I come in, I'll pull up, it's called pulling up the cases, and we pull up every death report in Minneapolis, and I'll look through each report, and I'll assign a case that I might have some questions about, and I'll talk to the detectives, explain why I think this needs to be looked into, and that's Monday through Friday kind of thing.
And so are you their direct supervisor then?
Yes.
So you started with Minneapolis Police Department in 1985.
Yes.
Do you know where you are in terms of seniority in the Minneapolis Police Department?
Yes. I'm the #1 officer in seniority. I hate to say that, but I am.
Understood. Were you called out to a scene on May 25th of 2020?
Yes.
And do you recall, why you were called to that scene?
Yeah, homicide responds, or I respond initially to critical incidents. And a critical incident can be anything from a death to a serious injury of either officers or the public. And so I was called in on this one.
So were you technically on duty at that time?
I was at home, and I was notified by my commander of this incident that happened at
Commander Shepard.
And so then did you respond to that scene?
Yes.
Do you recall about what time it was that you arrived at the scene?
It was a little bit after 9 p.m.
And the location of 38th in Chicago, were you familiar with that location at that time?
Yes.
Fair to say no stranger to calls of violent incidents at that intersection?
Yes, absolutely.
And when you arrived, can you just describe for the jury what you first saw when you arrived at that location?
I arrived on 38th Street, and I parked on the southwest corner on 38th Street. I saw yellow tape up, we call it this crime scene tape, around the intersection, I saw Sergeant Edwards, who I know from work, on his cell phone. And I saw two officers, and he was like in the middle of the scene, kind of. And then I saw two officers standing on the southwest or the southeast corner of the intersection.
And did you then approach those two officers?
Yes, Sergeant Edwards appeared to be busy on the phone, so I just walked up to the two officers.
And I'm going to show you, well, we had an opportunity before court to show you a piece of body cam footage, shows you approaching the scene, correct?
Yes.
And that appeared to be a true and accurate representation of your approach to those two officers.
Yes, it is.
And that reflects the time as well.
Yes.
Your Honor, I would offer Exhibit 96.
Any objection? '96 is received.
Then we'll publish 96.
Hmm.
I'm going to pause here just for a moment if I could. This is the intersection of 38th and Chicago.
Yes.
Bro, I'm not
And
banned
it looks
on
like
D
the
Live
time
again.
reflected here is 21:56.
D Live is so fucking
Yes.
weird.
So for those of us who have difficulty with that kind of math, even what is the real time that we
Yeah,
call?
yeah. It's 4 minutes to 10.
D Live is the weirdest.
So it was a little closer to 10 when you arrived.
Yes.
And there is an individual. I know it's dark and it's kind of hard to see, but do you know who the individual is in the crosswalk there?
I don't know.
And all right, let's continue.
Fake drugs too. Percocet, but it was really fentanyl mixed with meth.
I'm going to stop right here if you could, please. And just for the record, at 21:56:53, you see across the intersection there appears to be a person walking towards us.
Yes.
And do you know who that is?
That would be me.
And we'll continue, please.
Motherfucking detective.
I'll give you a call back. How you doing, Lieutenant?
What's going on?
All right, you can take that. So it appears that you came to the scene, the street closed, right?
Yes.
And that's the moment where you walked up and talked to the two officers?
Yes, I did.
Did you recognize those two officers?
Yes. No, I didn't.
And you appeared to be on the phone. Do you recall who you were talking to?
Spike British.
I don't know if it was
I
my
can't.
commander or a deputy chief. I'm not sure.
Oi, Bobby.
And then when you arrived
I
there,
stole my tea and my crumpets.
those two officers,
He's got a knife.
like you had just asked them a
Bobby,
question.
get him. He's got a
Did they
knife.
Give you some information about the incident.
Yes.
And based on that information, what did you conclude about their role in the incident?
There's a thing that we call involved officers and non-involved officers. And based on what they had told me, I determined they were involved officers.
Why would it be important to distinguish between involved and non-involved officers?
Well, if you're an involved officer, you need to be brought down to room 100 at City Hall, and you need to be brought down by a supervisor in separate cars.
And that's just according to policy.
Yes.
And so after having that conversation with them, what did you do next?
I talked to the sergeant, I believe, Sergeant Edwards, and Told him that we needed some more people out there.
You guys are funny.
He told me another sergeant was on
Bollocks!
his way.
Smack your
and,
gobber! I'll stop
I
that
told him
knife
that we
carrier
needed to
with
get
me
these guys
nightstick.
downtown.
And which sergeant, you remember, I'm sorry, which sergeant that was?
It might have been
Which
Australian, I
sergeant
don't know,
that was
Chad.
you talked to?
My Australian
don't
British is
remember.
like so the same.
Sergeant, Edwards?
I believe that's who I first talked to.
Okay. And
I'm so low on this
So-
screen.
showing you Exhibit 90, if we could please.
There you go.
And this is a photograph for the record of 2218. This is you speaking on the phone at that time, correct?
Yes.
And so here you're still dealing with things at the scene, is that right?
Yes.
And so we can take that down, I guess, thanks. The sergeant that you talked to, what kinds of things did you ask that sergeant to take care of?
I asked the patrol sergeant to arrange to have the two involved officers brought down to room 100, and that we needed some more officers at the scene.
Go on.
And why did you think you needed more officers at the scene?
To search for any possible witnesses or video.
And so then, after having that conversation, what did you do next?
I had called in two of the sergeants from homicide, the on-call team, to assist me.
And as you were doing that, did you undertake any other actions to try and identify things that might be helpful for the investigation?
Yes.
Like what?
If you stand in the center of the intersection and
Dr. Evil, let me make you a deal, alright? You keep the mojo, you keep the money, and I get your baby!
or, in this case, Milestone.
Come in here, I'm gonna eat ya!
This is a milestone camera.
Get in my belly!
Camera that's set up
Not very good, right?
in different areas of the city, and they can be monitored.
Do you find me sexy? Oh, look at my titties!
Crime or help if a crime occurs.
I'm just doing Fat Bastard
And,
from Austin
are you familiar
Power,
with that
not even with an
location? I
accent.
believe there was a milestone camera at that intersection.
I knew there was, yes.
I'm going to show you Exhibit 1. You recognize what's in that photograph?
Yes.
And what is that?
That's the intersection of 38th and Chicago.
Pretty
Do you
close.
know, can you show the jurors?
Shit,
right
well,
on the
hey,
screen, there
that's
should be a
good.
little
I gave it a
arrow
shot, I at least
showing
tried.
Where that camera is located.
I believe it was right here.
Okay. And how is it mounted, or where is it mounted?
You've heard worse.
You know, I'm not sure if it's on a light pole or under a light pole, but it's mounted up high.
Maybe
Right.
the dingo
fact, sometimes
ate
they call
your
it smoking.
baby.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
The dingo ate your baby.
Older guys and me. Right, is what you mean. When you were at the scene,
What's Hagrid? English, right?
did you
Not Scottish?
learn more about the condition of Mr. Floyd, the subject?
I did.
Do you recall when,
Whatever.
time there, you learned about that?
It was after Sergeant Dale arrived.
And so,
And
Sergeant Dale, one of the sergeants you called in to assist?
yes, Sergeant Bob Dale is one of the homicide teams that I called in.
And so this was after you had arranged the transport officers.
Yes.
And what did you learn about his condition?
That Mr. Floyd had died.
And were some decisions made about what would become of this investigation based on information? And what was decided?
That the BCA would be in charge of the investigation, the State Bureau of Criminal Apprehension.
And when that decision is made, what's the role of Minneapolis police at that scene?
Well, first it's to support the BCA investigative team with whatever they might need. that night. And also it's to secure any witnesses that we may find.
Oh, you're chatting on D
See
Live?
if they would be willing to talk to.
All right, I got my chat up now. I can see it.
Also,
You
it's,
love Fat
when you're
Bastard.
at
That
a
was very
scene,
entertaining. Nice.
Trying to locate.
I was
any
talking
video
to people on
cameras you
YouTube.
can, and filling in the BCA.
I don't know how to do this yet, but I have to make it a way
In fact, at some
so
point did
people on
BCA
D Live can
arrive?
see what people on YouTube are saying and vice versa.
And when they arrive, just describe a little bit.
Could
for
go
the
like
what the process
this.
is and
It's very
how they
distracting.
arrive.
Yeah, the BCA agent generally or specifically in this case?
Just generally.
Yeah. When the BCA arrives, they'll come up to you for a briefing, and you tell them what you have at the scene, what you've learned, and where people are at. You know, like in this case, the officers were brought to room 100, that kind of thing. And then you tell them, or you ask them what help they might need.
And then specifically, did something like that happen here in this case?
Yes.
All right. And I'm going to show you Exhibit 91 on the screen, please. And do you recognize what's depicted in this photograph?
Yes.
And again, this is the intersection of 38th and Chicago.
Yeah, that would be me in the center of the shot, talking with a BCA agent.
And this is starting that process of turning the scene over to them.
Right, yeah.
So the time here shows 2300, about 11 p.m.
Yes.
And so then, did you in fact turn this scene over to the BCA?
Yes, I did.
And that's shortly thereafter concluded your involvement with the scene?
Yes.
You talked earlier about the training you need to do to maintain your peace officer's license, correct?
Yes.
And as a Minneapolis police officer, you know, where do you get that training from?
Well, we'll get it from our training unit. We'll also get it from outside sources, you know, different schools that are being put on, some that are specific to homicide, some that are, you know, a one-day course, some may be a 2-week course, that kind of thing.
Does that training include instruction on the use of force?
Yes.
And how often do you get instruction on the use of force?
Once a year.
And how many officers have to go through that use of force training every year?
Every officer on the police department.
That includes the guy who's number one in seniority?
It includes me, yes, absolutely.
And when you, well, let me ask it this way. Are there also Minneapolis Police Department policies about the use of force?
Yes, there is.
And are you required to be familiar with those policies?
Yes, you are.
And when you do that use of force training, does it cover the policies as well?
Yes.
Do you also do some physical activity, taking people down and rolling around?
Yes, we have a mat that we use at our SOC center, and it's like a huge wrestling mat.
And are you
Sorry about that.
familiar with
Had to deal with
use of
something.
Force continuum?
Yes.
Get a dumbbell and make
Part of the
curls
Minneapolis
redeemable?
Police Department use of force
Fine, I will.
Yes,
And
sir.
there's some dumbbells. Hold
Describe
on.
in general what that means to the jurors.
Yeah, so basically the use of force continuum is guidelines, or it's policy actually, that we have to follow. And it's when, for instance, when you arrive at a scene, no matter what the scene, the first level, the lowest level, would be just your presence at a scene in uniform. The next step up may be your verbal skills that you've learned to help diffuse a situation.
All right,
or
the only
their
dumbbells in the
information,
area
whatever the situation
are
is.
5 kilos, which are apparently that's 11
The next
pounds.
step would be like a soft technique, escorting the person by their arm, that type of thing. The next level would be a hard technique. That's where you use your, you maybe have to use your or handcuffs.
You're 23, me came back beast. Hell yeah, JJ.
And finally, the
Yeah, I am chatting with mainly people on YouTube. I didn't even know I was live on D-Live. I thought they banned me, but it is what it is.
And so those levels change.
23, me came back positive from beast
For
mode.
what reasons might that change?
Yeah, well, if you're, say you're right at a scene and somebody's pointing a gun at you or shooting at you, of course you...
I'll
go
show you
to
my
the top
23 and me
level.
guys in a second. Again,
Um,
I've shown it off before, but
and that's how they may change.
So it's relative to the threat.
Right, yes.
3,
And
4,
are there different kinds of force that
6,
officers can use?
Yes.
7,
And
8.
have you ever,
9.
in all the years you've been working for the Minneapolis Police
10.
Department, been trained
All
to
right,
kneel
stand
on
up.
the neck of someone who is handcuffed behind their back in a prone position?
1.
No, I haven't.
Is that, if that were done, would that be considered force?
Absolutely.
What level of force might that be?
That would be the top tier, the deadly force.
Why?
Because
1.
of the fact that
2,
if your knee is on a person's neck,
3.
you can kill it.
Oh my God, this guy's the soy boy.
And in your training with the Minneapolis Police Department,
5.
Over the years, have you received training
6.
on restraining people?
Yes,
7. I'm going slow so I can feel the burn.
yes.
8,
And when you are
9,
handcuffing somebody, when you handcuff them, what is
10.
your responsibility as an officer
order some more.
with regard to that person?
1,
Well,
2,
could I give you an example?
3,
Okay.
4, 5,
Let
6,
me ask you this again. If
7,
you, as an officer, according to
8,
training, you
9,
handcuff somebody behind the back.
10. Oh, that was the hardest one,
With regard
chat.
to that person from that moment on.
Put these right here.
That person is yours. He's your responsibility. His safety is your responsibility. His well-being and is your responsibility.
Once you handcuff somebody,
Don't lock out your
does that
elbow?
affect
Alright.
The amount of force.
I'll try not to do
you
that
should
next
consider
time.
using?
Absolutely.
How so?
Yeah, so don't go all the way. Yeah, I
When
get
a
it. I
person
get
is
it.
cuffed, the threat level goes down all the way, to they're cuffed. How can they really hurt you?
Soybean alert. Soybean
And,
alert.
Circumstances when a cuffed person could still be combative.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. But you getting injured is way down.
What do you mean by that?
160 to
Well,
170
if you're,
times
you
180.
could
What does that
have
mean?
Some guy try to kick you or something. But you can move out of the way. That person is handcuffed, and they the threat level is just not there.
So by handcuffing somebody, you've taken away some of their ability to harm you.
Absolutely.
All right, 22.2%
And
Norwegian.
who's handcuffed becomes less combative. Does that change the amount of force that an officer is to use under policy?
Yes.
How so?
Well, if they become less combative, you may
Sweden,
have them sit
Norwegian.
on a curb, or
In these
the
regions.
idea is to calm the person down.
So
And
22%
if
that.
they are not a threat to you at that point, you try to, to
See?
help them,
22.2%.
so that they're not as upset as they may have been in the beginning.
Next. Wait for it.
In your 30 years of training with the Minneapolis Police Department and your experience, have you been trained on the prone position?
Yes.
And
I am
what has
20%
your training been
German, as you can see,
specific to the prone
right here.
position?
Well, once you secure or handcuff a person, you need
They
to
just
give
don't
them
know
body
exactly
control
where
as soon
in
as
Germany. It
possible,
says French and German, but if you
because it
scroll
restricts their
down,
breathing.
no evidence of
Handcuff
French.
Somebody behind their back.
Or Austria or
Have you been
Belgium,
trained?
which
Have you been handcuffed
I
behind
thought we
your
were
back?
possibly Belgish.
And-
Belgish?
Have you been trained
Belgian,
on
but we're not.
what happens to individuals when they're handcuffed behind the back?
Yes.
19.7% German.
How does it affect them physically?
So 22%
It stretches the
Norway,
back,
19.7% German,
and it makes it more difficult to breathe.
and then 5.9
If you
broadly
put somebody in the prone position,
Northwestern European.
Is it well known this danger of putting
So
somebody in the prone
Norway,
position?
France, Finland, somewhere in there.
Sustained.
How long have you had training on the dangers of the prone position as part
And
of
then-
a Minneapolis police officer?
For
30%
since,
Polish.
1985.
Thanks a lot, Mom.
And is it?
She's
part of
fucking
your
half
training
Polish.
regularly to learn about
So
keeping somebody in the prone position?
somewhere in these
What has the
regions,
training been with regard
fucking
to-
Poland, man. 30% Polish.
When the person
Thanks a lot, Mom.
You need to turn
And then-
them aside or have them sit up.
This is the weird one, chat. This one was the left curveball that nobody knew about. It surprised everyone in my
Because,
family.
As I mentioned earlier, your muscles are pulling.
19.9%
And if you let
Croatian
them that's constricting your breathing.
in these weird counties. Bolshevik fucking county and, Bolshevik motherfucking county and all this shit. Look at this. Croatia.
As a Minneapolis police
20%! 19.9%!
provided with training
Weird.
on medical intervention.
And then it's
Yes.
2.2%
I assume you're not
broadly European
medics, but you receive some
and
level.
0.1 unassigned.
We're first responders.
And that is shizbang.
Does that include doing?
If you want to see me without a beard, go look at my old YouTube videos. I'm going to shave soon too. I look
How
a
often
lot
is that
younger.
part of your training?
CPR, it's like. every
It's
other
not
year.
French and German though. It's just German. They break it down like that, but then they tell you it's not really
Minneapolis
French
Police
later. It's weird.
Department policies, is there an obligation to
So
provide
cheers, everyone.
medical intervention when necessary?
Absolutely.
What is the general teaching that you get
Hell
with
yeah.
regard to medical intervention?
Well, again, it's been that you need to provide medical care for the person that is in distress.
And would that be true even if you've called an ambulance to come to the scene?
Yeah, absolutely. The ambulance will.
Let me grab another beer and read chat.
Get there in whatever amount of time, and in that time period, you need to provide.
Wow, this cop is stabbing this other cop in the back. I thought they were gonna help each other. Nah.
Before they arrive.
So I'll add curls to the thing on Twitch. Whoever asked me that.
Why don't we take our mid-morning break? Members of the jury will take our 20-minute mid-morning break. The attorneys and I will deal with the issue while you're off break.
Chat, we're gonna skip the break after I read chat. They trained us to sit down until they stop moving, boss. Oh, Jesus. Oh, come on, Shiz. Tell us the genetic breakdown. Alright, I did that. You need at least a 20-pounder. Don't have it. Think there's some Celtic in there? What country is that? Celt is not a country, is it? I curl 130 with resistance bands. Oh, I didn't know we were dealing with the badass over here, chat. Alright. I turned off the sound effects for now. But you wanted to redeem nut, so I'll hit you with my busted nut. The ideal rep... Yeah, I still don't know what that means. Shotgun beers between sets for max gains. That's actually a good idea. Amsterdam, you're going for 50 reps right now? All right, well, don't lock your fucking cock. Degrees of rotation, crossing this guy's gonna be good. Norwegian. JJ said Sweden, German, Norwegian. Cool, awesome. I have to look at mine again. Hell yeah, let me know. Where's the .1 African that they're on there for no reason? See, here's the thing. If they for some reason think you're a racist, they randomly throw in .1 Ashkenazi Jew or .1 African. But guess what? Clean, baby. Melissa, how I was going to say he was got to be part Polish. Yeah, dude. A big part of me is Polish. Polish have good beer. Slav. Poland equals based. Based, but why? Being part Balkan with 30% Polish is pretty common. Yeah. My mom was half Polish. My dad also was a little Polish. So it made a big part of me Polish. No beard equals shiz babyface. That's true. No reparations for you. Shut up. Essentially, your mother's father or mother was Slavic. So I actually want my parents to do one of those things. So I can, because then you can connect it to yours and you can see exactly what part you got from each parent, which would be pretty cool. Do they make the difference between French and Saxon? Dude, it does a lot of differences. You should get one. It was $140 for the one that I got. Because the one that I got, it gives you a health breakdown also. So it tells you, like, you're predisposed to this. For example, my family, according to this, is slightly above, like, slightly at risk to get diabetes too or something. So that's why I told my fat brother to stop eating so much chocolate fucking brownies. So German and France are stuck together because the earlier Saxons of France. Yeah, because they probably had, like, they can trace it back to, I don't know, must be similar or something? Similar fucking genes? I don't know, man. I do not know. Someone said, Gigi said cheers. I'm going to cheers you right now. Cheers! Celtic is mostly from there. I asked which country. I said Celt isn't a country. But the Celts originated near Normandy, so that's Germany. BRB, gotta make coffee. They were pushed west. Okay, we're caught up on chat. Let's scooch back into the fucking shit. This is why I started a half hour late, so I could skip this shit. You got a .1 Egyptian? That's actually kind of cool. Indian from India? Wow. What a weird fucking mix that you got. Your people were fucking some strange pussy, man. So a couple of your family members had some exotic fever.
Just a reminder, you're still under oath.
But that's okay, you know.
Thank you, Your Honor.
I don't know if you're American, but America is the mixing pot.
I want to draw your attention back to the incident on May 25th of 2020.
Yes.
Earlier you told the jurors about being at the scene, finishing your work there. The next day, did you have an opportunity to review some video of that incident?
Yes.
And do you recall what that video, where you saw it?
Normandy is on the coast of
Yes.
France.
And
Got
was
it.
We've been calling the Darnella Fraser video.
Yes.
Did you watch that video in its entirety?
Yes, I did.
And since then, have you had an opportunity to watch other video of the incident?
Yes.
And specifically, have you watched body-worn camera video of the incident from the involved officers?
Yes.
And based on that and your years of training and experience with the Minneapolis Police Department, you saw then Officer Chauvin with his knee on Mr. Floyd's neck, correct?
Yes.
Would you call what you saw there a use of force?
Yes.
And did that use of force continue until the ambulance arrived?
Yes, it did.
Was there any change in the level of force being used until the ambulance arrived?
No.
And what do you think about that use of force during that time period?
I'm sorry?
What do you think about that use of force during that time period?
A little vague. Could you limit it to the time frame?
Right. Okay. So, based on your review of the body-worn camera videos of the incident,
Yes.
and directing your attention to that moment when Mr. Floyd is placed on the ground,
Yes.
what is your view of that use of force during that time period?
Unnecessary.
What do you mean?
Well, first of all, pulling him down to the ground, face down, and putting your knee on a neck for that amount of time, it's just
Soy cop.
uncalled for.
Soy cop.
I saw no reason why the officers felt they were in danger, if that's what they felt. And that's what they would have to feel to be able to use that kind of force.
So, in your opinion,
48% British
have stopped
/
once
Irish.
he was handcuffed
Okay.
and prone on
38% French or German.
Absolutely.
And
But you can break it down and
should
figure
I ask
out
that question then?
where are
He
you?
appeared he
Are
had
you
stopped.
French or are you German?
I'm sorry.
And
'Cause I know
it
you can
appeared
do
he had
that.
Stopped putting up any resistance.
17% European.
Absolutely.
So you're
I
full
would stop.
European, dude. Nice.
I have nothing further, Your Honor.
Mr. Nelson.
I'm basically 20 Norway, 20
I may just
German.
take a moment, Your Honor.
30 Poland, 20 Croatia. Does that even add up? And then, yeah, 10% random. Just random fucking Europe. So that's basically full on European, right? Where's Croatia? Is that considered European?
Good morning, Lieutenant Zimmerman.
Good morning.
Thank you for being here today.
You're welcome.
So you testified that you have been a Minneapolis police officer since June 5th, 1985, correct?
1985, yes.
And prior to that, you were with another agency.
Yes.
And when you initially came on to the Minneapolis Police Department, you were a patrol officer, correct?
Yes.
And you were a patrol officer from 1985 to approximately 1993.
Oh, it's right by Austria
when the sergeant's exam
and
was
Hungary.
promoted.
Yes.
And so it's fair to say that since 1993, so
Badass.
27, 28 years, you've not been on patrol in the city of Minneapolis.
Correct.
Your assignments have been investigative in nature, correct?
Yes.
And generally speaking, an investigative role is more of a follow-up type role, right?
Yes.
So an incident occurs on the street, it gets assigned to a detective, and then your job is to investigate the circumstances of that incident, right?
Yes.
And so it's fair to say that since 1993, you've not, other than perhaps for ceremonial reasons, you've not worn a uniform on a daily basis.
Well, I don't know if I would call it ceremonial.
Well,
I have to wear a uniform.
You have to wear a uniform from time to time, but your daily role is as a plainclothes police officer, correct?
Yes.
And you're not out patrolling the streets, making arrests, things of that nature.
No.
All right. And it's fair to say then that your experience with the use of force of late has been primarily through training.
Through what?
Your training.
Yes.
All right. Meaning you're not out actively, other than perhaps arresting a homicide suspect, you're not out actively patrolling and arresting people for less serious offenses.
No.
Right. And so you described the use of force continuum as including mere presence being a type of the use of force, right?
Yes.
And so when you arrive on scene as a lieutenant in the homicide unit, that is a use of force, right?
If people know I'm a lieutenant, yes.
Or if they know you're a police officer, perhaps.
I want to show you
And
something.
then you describe
Hanging right above my
soft
bed.
techniques like escort holds, things of that nature, right?
Yes.
And I'm assuming that in the last, since 1993, and you were promoted to sergeant, you've handcuffed some people in that time frame.
I have.
Right. When's the last time you got in a physical fight with a person?
About in 2018.
Okay, so it's been a couple of years since you.
My aunt bought this for my mom when she got married.
All right. And so,
It's
you
hanging
would
up in my
agree
room.
that the use of force as an investigator is, or the higher levels of force as an investigator is less likely than a patrol officer.
I'm sorry, I don't understand your question.
I'll rephrase it. The frequency with which you have to use higher levels of force as an investigator.
Look at his
doesn't
guitar.
happen all that often.
See that bass?
Correct.
Left-handed
And so
violin bass?
Your experience generally as a use of force, or involving the use of force, is primarily in this annual, what's called defensive tactics training, right?
Yes.
And the defensive tactics training is one of the requirements you need to use or to complete in order to maintain your license as a police officer, right?
Yes.
And you would agree that, or I'm presuming that since 1985 until the present day, tactics have changed as a police officer.
Check this out.
Some tactics have changed.
Right. And it's fair to say that you are not a trainer in the Minneapolis Police Academy relevant to the use of force, correct?
Now I'm right-handed, but
You do not teach
Check that
your
out.
police officers defensive tactics.
it's not the exact same brand, but
Um,
Jay Turner.
Your
It's really, really light.
you would agree, however, that
No, it's a bass,
roughly
chat.
10 years ago, the Minneapolis Police Department kind of moved away from trying to hit people to control them and started using body weight to try to control people.
I don't think I would agree with that.
Okay, so you think that, I mean, within the arsenal, so to speak, of a police officer, it's as common to punch or strike someone in the use of force as it is to just use what are called takedown moves or body weight pins.
Yes.
And that's been throughout your entirety of your career?
Yes.
Okay. And so, and you're basing that again on your experience as just going through the defensive tactics requirements.
Right.
All right.
My parents gave me this
And
for my
again,
birthday
as
when
a
I was
lieutenant and the number
19.
one senior officer in the Minneapolis Police Department, I'm presuming that your understanding of the use of force
These are all the album covers
the
there.
Minneapolis Police Department policies on the use of force, right?
Yes.
And the Minneapolis Police Department policies are designed.
This one's rare.
Based on your understanding, to address the legal requirements for the use of
It's a poster of
force. And so there are factors
pictures taken
that
in the studio
determine whether or not a
while they
use
were
of force
recording.
is proportional, reasonable, things of that nature, right?
Correct.
And what we look at in any particular case is the totality of the circumstances.
So
Yes.
So
Pretty
there's
fucking cool,
lots
right?
of different information that a police officer
I have a lot of
has
Beatles
to
shit.
use in
So does my
order
mom.
to determine the level.
My
of
mom has
force
way
to
more
use
Beatles shit than I have.
Circumstances.
Yes.
Agreed.
Yes.
Now, in terms of the Minneapolis Police Department, are you familiar with the Minneapolis Police Department's critical thinking or critical decision-making model?
Yes.
And you would agree, I'm assuming again, based on a long career, that an officer is constantly taking in new information, and that information will affect the decisions he or she makes, right?
That's correct.
And would you also agree that the training that you received initially as a police officer is probably a lot different than the academy now?
Yes.
Obviously, the available tools that officers have are a lot different today than they were in 85, 90, 95.
Yes.
Body cameras, they didn't exist when you first became a police officer.
That's correct.
Tasers were not a thing either, right?
No.
You carried a gun and some handcuffs and kind of old school cop, right?
Yes.
Now, in terms of the decision making of a police officer, would you agree that there are certain pieces of information that that officer has that affect his or her decisions on the use of force?
Yes.
And some of that information is very immediate, kind of low-level information. Agreed?
Yes.
So, for example, what just happened with this particular suspect, right?
Yes.
Is this suspect under the influence of a controlled substance, or is he sober?
Yes.
Right? What are you looking at in that moment through your own eyes, right?
Yes.
That's the officer's experience in any situation, right?
Right.
You look at other things that may be hazards or threats in the immediate vicinity, correct?
Yes.
So you're going to assess, are there people watching? Are there people videotaping? Are those people happy or angry, etc., right?
Yes.
You're going to look
I also
at,
love Pink Floyd and a lot of other bands from
what we would refer to as
the UK.
scene security, right?
Yes.
You have a responsibility as a police officer for your partners who may be close to you, right?
Yes.
You have a responsibility as a police officer for all of the people in
So
the
these
immediate area,
kids.
right?
Yes.
And so scene security is kind of trying to keep it as tight as possible and keep everybody in the area safe. Agreed? In turn, you were asked a series of questions about your an officer's medical responsibilities.
I'm sorry.
I said, you were asked a series of questions about your medical training and an officer's medical, what they're supposed to do.
Right. Yeah.
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 And even in the assessment of a medical emergency, there are many factors that come into that assessment, correct?
Yes.
To your knowledge, Minneapolis police officers they're trained medically at a fairly low level. They're not paramedics, doctors, etc.
That's correct.
You're a first responder.
Yes.
Basically, you're taught how to apply tourniquets, patches for gunshots, stop bleeding, basic CPR, and resuscitative efforts, right?
That's correct.
A police officer's job primarily is to keep the scene safe. Agreed?
I'm sorry.
A police officer's responsibility is to keep the scene secure and safe. Agreed?
Yes.
Minneapolis police policy requires the involvement of a higher level of medical intervention if the circumstances dictate, correct?
Yes.
And an officer is required, if someone is having a medical emergency, to take what steps they're able to reasonably.
I need some more,
right?
Yes.
Jen, I need some more hand sanitizer.
And that would include potentially calling EMS.
That's correct.
But then you have all of these immediate factors, right, that come into play.
We're good.
But then you can kind of widen that lens a little bit, and there are some other factors that come into play in terms of the use of force, again, based on your training and experience.
Yes.
Such as, what do we know about the location generally, right?
Yes.
Is this a field in the middle of the woods, or is this a higher crime area, right?
Yes.
An officer is evaluating that as a process, as a part of the process involving the use of force. Agreed?
Yes.
You look at other things such as tactical advantages or disadvantages. Agreed?
Yes.
So if you are not able to get what's called concealment or cover, that becomes a question, right?
In what?
Well, in a use of force, you're examining the surrounding area, right? To see if something happens, can I conceal and cover, right?
Yes.
You also, in addition to the scene security, you need to deal with securing the scene, which is different than scene security. Agreed?
Yes.
Scene security is maintaining the safety of everyone around, including yourself and your partners, right?
Yes.
Securing the scene is making sure that the scene itself is preserved and kept tight, right?
Correct. Yes.
And in fact, a police officer's responsibility and part of the use of force determination is to prevent or avoid the use of force against other people. Agreed?
Yes, absolutely.
So if you have to use force against one person to avoid using force against others, that's a factor that an officer should consider. Agreed?
I don't know if I would agree with that.
Okay. Again, within the training department, those people who are, it's their jobs to do that. They may be better to answer those questions.
Yes.
All right. And then even from there, you can widen the lens even further, and an officer will look at his training, right?
Yes.
What he is trained to do or not to do, right?
Yes.
He will look and take into experience, or he or she will take into account his or her own experience from their past career. Agreed?
Yes.
So things like fighting with someone, and what's the probability or possibility that that person is going to continue fighting with you in the future, right? Even after you have them subdued.
I don't know. I don't think I can agree to that totally, but I understand what you're saying.
There are circumstances where after a person is rendered unconscious, and then you perform, you revive that person, that they are more combative than they were initially. Agreed?
Yes.
I'm kidding, chat.
And again, in terms of your own past experience, an
It's a
officer's
joke.
own past experiences,
On
taking
conspiracy
that into
theorists.
consideration as well.
Sure.
Now, you testified that you were never, you have never been trained as a Minneapolis police officer to use a knee on the neck of a suspect.
That's correct.
You would agree, however, that in a fight for your life, generally speaking, in a fight for your life, you as an officer are allowed to use whatever force is reasonable and necessary, correct?
Yes.
And that can even involve improvisation. Agreed?
Yes.
Minneapolis Police Department policy allows a police officer to use whatever means are available to him to protect himself and others, right?
Yes.
So if there's a paint can sitting on the table and someone is attacking, you can use that paint can as a weapon.
Yes.
And in fact, you have been trained in the prone handcuffing techniques, correct?
Yes.
And it's your testimony that Minneapolis Police Department has never ever trained anyone to put their knee across the shoulder and to the base of the neck?
I didn't say that.
Okay? So you would agree then that pursuant to Minneapolis Police Department training, when a suspect is arrested and in the process of being handcuffed or being restrained, it would be consistent with the Minneapolis Police Department training you've received to place your knee across the shoulder to the base of the neck.
Say yes, dude.
Don't
Under
know if I-
oath. Under oath.
The question was handcuffing, and we've certainly been trained to put the knee on the shoulder, but I don't know about just restraining a person. I don't recall being trained in that, but.
Okay. Again, possible based on the circumstances.
Sure.
Right? And when an officer is
The dancer around the fucking
and
answer the
called
question.
for EMS, have you heard the term that we're holding this person for EMS?
Yes.
Okay. And essentially that means you want to keep them in that position until EMS arrives because they're more capable to deal with whatever this situation is. Agreed?
No, I don't think I would agree with that.
Okay. How would you describe the term hold for EMS?
Hold for EMS is that you are holding him for EMS or her.
And sometimes people are held for EMS in a restrained position. Agreed?
Yes, sometimes. Yeah.
Now, you also testified that once a person is handcuffed, the threat, I think you said, is gone. It's at the lowest threat level, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Now, that obviously, a person who's handcuffed can still pose a threat, right?
I suppose they could, yeah.
So an officer who is even though he has someone handcuffed, that person could continue to kick the officer.
Yeah, I suppose, yeah.
That person could continue to thrash his body around. Agreed?
Sure.
And part of the reason police officers restrain people is for that person's own safety. Agreed?
Absolutely, yeah.
All right, see you later,
Now,
Gigi.
It also presumes
See ya,
that
bye-bye.
the handcuffs were placed on correctly.
Give
right?
me some snackies.
Sometimes in a struggle or
Just kidding.
An attempt to handcuff someone, handcuffs aren't placed on properly and they can pop open or be too big for a suspect, right?
Yeah, I don't know if I've ever seen them too big, for a suspect. Sometimes they're too tight,
Okay.
but
If sometimes in the process of handcuffing someone, one handcuff goes on, thereby giving the suspect a potential weapon if he were to break free, right?
Yes.
Or she, for that
yes,
matter. And officers have been attacked with their own handcuffs, in your experience, right?
oh yeah, yes,
So you would agree that the use of force is a dynamic series of decision making based on a lot of different information.
absolutely.
And it's based upon a lot of information that is not necessarily captured on a body camera. Agreed?
Yes, that's correct.
The body camera is only so effective to show what the body camera sees and not what the officer sees.
That's correct.
Now, in terms of what you did in this particular case, essentially, you would be are you what's called Car 21? Is that the homicide unit? And I may
No, it's not.
Car 9? I don't know.
No.
You're just homicide. There's some car associated with homicide, right?
Yeah, yeah.
What car is that?
We would be car, well, it would be like car 112 or 108 or 110,
Okay.
that kind of thing.
All right. So you got called, or you were made aware of this incident back on May 25th of 2020. You understood it to be a critical incident, correct?
Yes,
And it is Minneapolis Police Department policy to turn over the investigation of any critical incident, or the majority of critical incidents, we should say, to the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, right?
yes,
And that is to avoid any potential conflicts between the involved officers, right?
yes, that's right.
And so your role, you heard this call came out and you kind of self-assigned to show up here?
Yes,
And you did that because you wanted to make sure the scene was secure, right?
yes,
To make sure that the officers who have responded to the scene were doing the things that they should be doing in connection with a critical incident,
that's correct.
such as roping off or tying off the tape, or taping off the scene, I should say, right?
Putting up crime scene tape?
Yes.
Yes,
Not permitting citizens to come wandering through the scene, right?
yeah, yeah,
Canvassing the area, I think you said. And ultimately, your role in this particular case was limited to a couple of hours of time, making sure those things were done, and until BCA agents arrive and you handed off the scene, right?
yes, that's correct.
All right. And it was not until later that you were asked to review the body-worn cameras of the officers and consider the use of force, right?
Yes,
And it would not be within your normal role or job duties to do such a use of force analysis, right?
that's correct.
I have no further questions.
You direct?
Lieutenant Zimmerman, you had the opportunity to review the body-worn cameras from
Yes.
officers involved.
Yes.
Did that also capture the bystanders on the sidewalk during the incident?
Yes.
Was there something about that group of bystanders that in your assessment was an uncontrollable threat to the officers at the scene?
No.
Would there be a way, or, well, I mean, ask it this way. Would there be other ways for officers to deal with bystanders?
Yes.
And could that include calling for backup?
Yes.
Would the presence of multiple officers at a scene be a relevant fact for an officer to consider when using an amount of force on a handcuffed and restrained subject?
No. It shouldn't be.
Well, but if there's some concern about the crowd, would it be relevant that there were other officers already at the scene?
Oh, I see. Yeah. No, it doesn't matter, the crowd, as long as they're not attacking you. The crowd really shouldn't have an effect on your actions.
That's bullshit.
You were asked if the use of force training has changed over time,
Yes.
but you still get the most up-to-date training every year when you go to the use of force training.
I do, yes.
And you were asked about, has the academy changed since you went to the academy?
Yes.
And you haven't been through the academy since then, correct?
Right, yeah.
But you have some familiarity with how the academy trains new officers.
Absolutely.
And do you think that academy training provides appropriate training for officers?
Yes, it should.
It would provide the most up-to-date training on the use of force for Minneapolis officers that take the academy type training?
Yes.
You were asked if you were a trainer, and you are not a use of force trainer.
That's correct.
You are a student in
Yes.
use of force. And, but it's your testimony that based on all the training you go through every year, it's well known that the prone position is dangerous.
Absolutely, yes.
Doesn't take a trainer to be able to say that, you've learned it.
Yes.
And that's been something that's been trained repeatedly?
Absolutely. That hasn't changed.
You were asked about the critical decision-making model.
Yes.
Familiar with that from your training?
Yes.
And part of that is continually reassessing the need for force.
Correct.
Is that a fair statement?
Yes.
And so that would include reassessing the location,
Yes.
the tactical advantage,
Yes.
conceal and cover,
Yes.
scene security,
Yes.
security in scene,
Yes.
or security of the scene,
Yes.
medical distress of the person restrained,
Yes.
When you watched the body camera videos, did those videos capture those types of circumstances relative to the restraint of Mr. Floyd?
Yes.
And you were able to assess those things in telling the jury what you thought earlier about the restraint of Mr. Floyd?
I am.
When you watched those videos, at some point during the restraint, did you see Mr. Floyd kicking the officers?
No, I didn't.
May have happened initially, but after that, did you see any kicking?
No, none.
Defense counsel asked you about the concept of holding for EMS.
Yes,
So sometimes it's necessary to keep the person there so they can receive medical treatment.
that's correct.
Does holding for EMS excuse an officer from providing medical attention that they've been trained to provide?
No, it doesn't.
Does holding for EMS excuse officers from continuing to use this decision-making model about the use of force?
No, it doesn't.
Does holding for EMS excuse officers from using other resources like other officers at the scene to
No.
deal with? You were asked about handcuffs. If handcuffs are not properly locked, can they tighten?
Yes.
Can they loosen?
I'm sorry?
If they're properly connected, can they loosen?
Mhm.
They can come open. But if they're locked, can they still tighten?
That's right.
If they're not, I think the term is double locked.
Right, yes.
And based on your review of the body cams, did you see any need for Officer Chauvin to improvise by putting his knee on Mr. Floyd for 9 minutes and 29 seconds?
No, I did not.
I have nothing further, Your Honor.
Any requests? All right. Thank you, Lieutenant. You may step down. Thank you. Counsel sidebar? Day and Right. Members of the jury, that's going to do it for today. So we're going to release you, adjourn for the day, and return hopefully to start 9:15 on Monday.
Oh, yeah,
We
they
have
said there's not gonna be a
before that we have to deal
afternoon
with, so it might be
thingy
9:30,
today.
But let's shoot for 9:15. All right. Thank you. Have a good weekend.
All right, chat. Just let me get down and dirty with you, all right? Let me get real down and dirty with you for a second.
Fucking pussy ass bitch. Fucking pussy ass bitch. Fucking pussy ass bitch. Fucking pussy ass bitch.
I'm leaving to go on vacation sometime the next 3 or 4 days or something like that. So what I'm saying is this. I'm gonna stream from where I'm at. Do a hot tub stream or two, you know. Have some fun. But also, for the next couple days, I may or may not stream as much, or maybe at all. I don't know yet, though. So I'm just being completely transparent. I have to, do a bunch of laundry, pack, get my shit together, and I might not have enough time to stream and do that shit. Or maybe I will. If I can do all my shit, I'll stream also. But I'll stream when... I'm just saying for packing to go on vacation. When I get there, I'll stream. Bring my laptop anyways, so I can do protest streams and shit too. But other than that, for this morning's stream, we're gonna cut it right now. I'm gonna go get my laundry on. And maybe I'll go on Twitch and stream protest shit tonight. I don't know, though. But thanks a lot for hanging out, everybody. And we'll see you on the next one.